All right, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the very first time today, and I know we do have a bunch of groups for which that is the case, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, May is our epic month of biodiversity. In addition to over 40 live programs throughout the month, we also have 2 huge programs and campaigns on the go. Many of our teachers will know that we are currently in the midst of our Backyard Bio Global Nature campaign, where we are encouraging kids to get out, exploring that wildlife near them, taking snapshots and images and sharing them with us on social media, iNaturalist, and through direct classroom connections around the world. So do check out backyardbio.net about that. In just 2 weekends too, we are launching the Global Biodiversity Festival, the biggest program we've ever run as an organization. Over 170 programs over 3 epic days, 72 straight hours of broadcast, featuring people from all the continents, over 90 countries, I think. It's going to be a crazy celebration. Register on the website today. Now, today's program, it's kind of funny. We had 2 programs earlier today with Parks Canada talking about the amazing area near Jasper, and we are continuing the epic Alberta Park celebration with the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada with their 2nd program with a member of their Youth Advisory Council. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte in a minute. She's going to tell us all about the amazing Roots and Shoots program of the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada. So we're going to learn a lot about that. And then what we're all here for, we're going to dive in with Robin Pollard to talk about human-wildlife coexistence in the Bow Valley. Again, this incredibly biodiverse special region of both Canada and the entire world. I hope you guys are as excited as I am, certainly a little bit breathless after this introduction. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte to take us away. So Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us, and let's do this thing.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. I'm coming to you today on behalf of the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada and our flagship program, Roots and Shoots. So I'm going to do a really quick introductory presentation for you today before introducing you to Robin Pollard from our Youth Advisory Council. So who am I? My name is Charlotte Burke, and I am the Program Manager of Roots and Shoots at the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada. The Jane Goodall Institute of Canada is one of many global chapters of the Jane Goodall Institute as a whole. What started with Jane's work protecting chimpanzee habitats in sub-Saharan African countries and supporting the local economies within them has now grown into a global effort to improve the lives of people, all animals, and the environment as a whole. In Canada, a lot of our work focuses on a few major programs: our Africa programs, our Roots and Shoots, and our Uncovering Common Ground project. For anyone who doesn't know who Jane Goodall is, Jane is a famous primatologist who had the opportunity to study chimpanzees in sub-Saharan Africa as a young girl alongside Dr. Louis Leakey. Dr. Louis Leakey studied the evolution of humans and had asked Jane to study chimpanzees to determine how closely related they were to humans. And despite having no scientific foundation, Jane studied chimpanzees using her intuition and love for animals in Gombe National Park of Tanzania. She noticed that similar to us, chimpanzees used tools to gather and eat food and engaged in complex family relationships and emotions like we do, with siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles and parents that all shared meals, played, and argued like we do. Her love for chimpanzees and desire to protect their habitat led her to redefine global conservation to include the needs of local people, their economy, and the environment around them. And today, Jane spends nearly 350 days of the year traveling the world and speaking to people about the threats facing chimpanzees, the environmental crisis as a whole, and she urges each of us to take action in any way we can on behalf of all living things and the planet we all must share. And through this work, the Roots and Shoots program was born in 1991. So what started as 12 Tanzanian students wanting to make a difference in their community has now expanded to a community-led Roots and Shoots projects in over 50 countries across the world. And through this program, youth are encouraged to seek ways to help people, animals, or the environment by tackling a problem that they've identified. Our Canadian chapter also offers support to these projects through our 8 fun community grants each fall, which we're really, really proud of. And of course, in order to keep youth at the core of our work, the Jane Goodall Institute launched the first cohort of our Youth Advisory Council in June of 2020. Their role is to help shape the direction of Roots and Shoots while also driving their own initiatives as a group, which have included initiatives such as a series of events focused on centering Indigenous leadership and youth action in political decision-making, a letter to Canadian federal politicians, and news articles in addition to these wonderful webinars that you have today. And with that, I'm really proud to introduce one of our council members, Robin. Robin is reporting from Treaty 7 territory in Alberta, which is also known as Canmore. Robin grew up in the rapidly expanding mountain town of Canmore, where she saw the daily struggles of wildlife as urban expansion took over. This led to her work in local advocacy for wildlife corridors and other protection measures. And now she's also achieved a bachelor's degree in both Indigenous Studies and Environmental Studies from the University of Victoria. A lot of what Robin will be teaching you today, it will be great to apply to your backyard BioBlitz this month, as you're likely to interact with either wildlife or things that could impact wildlife as you go. And as always, please feel free to get in touch with us at Jane Goodall Can on our social media platforms or by visiting janegoodall.ca for more information. Have a wonderful time with your backyard BioBlitz this month, everyone. And Robin, over to you.
Thank you so much. So my name is Robin. I am actually not quite finished my degree. I still have a couple more years left, but studying Indigenous Studies and Environmental Studies. And I think I might just share my screen here first and then do more of an intro and territory acknowledgement after that. Sorry, folks.
No hurry at all good. And it's up. We're good to go.
Good. Okay, so I wanted to start with kind of understanding about whose land I am on here. And as you can see, a bunch of different people share this land with me. So that includes the Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina, and Blackfoot nations, and as well Métis people. So I'm within Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. And also other more than human people. So those are bears, elk. You can see, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor here, but took some photos of the wildlife that also share these lands. If you haven't heard of Native Land Net, then I highly recommend going to check it out. I put the link here. Teachers, you can do this with your class to find out whose lands you're on. It's super cool. It gives you a map kind of like this. And it can zero in on exactly where you are and tell you whose nation's lands you are currently on. So a territorial acknowledgement for me is something that is very meaningful. I try to locate myself in these acknowledgements, and everyone can locate themselves as well. So whether it's in your classroom, understanding kind of why you're there, how you've come to be there. So for me, was born and raised in the Bow Valley. I am a white settler on these lands, and I am learning every day as much as I can about the history of these lands and what actions I can take to try and be an ally and stand in solidarity with Indigenous people. This is a book that was written by Chief John Snow. He is the chief of the Stoney Nation, of whose lands I am on. And it's a story about the Bow Valley. So I suggest for folks who are in different places, because we're all over North America or Turtle Island, it seems, check in with local Indigenous authors and see what they say about the lands that they are on. And so what do I mean by wildlife? So wildlife changes everywhere you go in the Bow Valley. This is kind of some of what we see around here. And so if I was with you, if I could see you, I'd ask you to take your guesses at what everything is. Your teachers might not like me for doing this, but I give you permission to try and yell out the names of all the animals. So the first on the left here, this one, what do you folks think this is? This is an elk. This is a bear, and this is a cougar, so a mountain lion. And so these are all animals. In fact, I saw an elk last night while I was walking my dog. They just walk around the neighborhood. Sometimes they peer into people's windows. So we really do live with wildlife here, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and we're gonna talk more about that. Teachers, if you want to, as a follow-up, you can go to the Biosphere Institute or just Google Living with Wildlife Resources, and it comes up with a bunch of different activities and resources to kind of further your knowledge on this. But yeah, so when I talk about wildlife, these are the types of animals that I'm talking about, as well as a bunch of others. And I'm leaving out, squirrels and all the less kind of big ones that we think about when we talk about bigger mammals and that kind of things, but they're nonetheless important. And so I'm just gonna dive right in with this film that was created by Leanne Allison, who is a family friend and a Canmore local. Please let me know if you can't hear or see.
I think the Bow Valley is unique in the sense that we still have these animals living amongst us or near us. And a large part of the global population is living in urban areas. They don't know wildlife. They don't know anything about them. And here we have this wonderful opportunity to be living amongst wildlife and trying to find this balance where we can do it, whatever it is we need to do to get through our daily lives, but we also have the opportunity to know that there's these animals in the same valley as us, where we live and recreate and work. And I think for a lot of us, that's why we live in the Bow Valley. We live in an area that has millions of people coming to visit it from all over the planet. Everybody's having to learn new things every single year because of the change in the landscape. And that includes animals like bears and elk and how they move through the valley. At times we don't even realize what we've accomplished here. And it's a big, big deal because there's not too many places, if any, other place on the continent anyway, that has been able to do what we've been able to do here. But I think most of us would say that we're not done yet.
All right, so that was just a little sneak peek into what it's like to live in the valley. Those school buses that you saw, that is a very familiar scene for me because that is the school that I went to when I was probably your age in middle school, grade 3 to 8, I think, was that school. And so very common to see elk grazing in the field when we went out for recess. Ooh, we don't want to watch that again. Okay, so what does it mean to live with wildlife? Wildlife needs lands to live and to roam. They need space to eat and mate and play. So this was in the video, and this is, I'll let you take your chances at guessing what this is. This is the Trans-Canada Highway, and the cars drive through here, the tunnels, and this is a grassy section. It's called an overpass. And what it does is it connects this side of the highway to this side of the highway so that wildlife can cross the highways without being killed or injured by vehicles. So it doesn't totally prevent wildlife deaths on the roads, unfortunately, but it does a really good job of working so far. And the more overpasses, and there's some as well that go underneath the highway, and that's what they're there for. They're to connect one side with another side so that wildlife have more access and more ability to roam and to go further. So one thing that has happened with the connectivity that we have, these roads that we've built, is we have built a lot of roads that have then severed wildlife passage, like places where wildlife like to roam and where they call home. So, wildlife see no borders, but we have created borders and we've created roads and developments. And so on your left here is a map from what is called the Yellowstone-to-Yukon Society or Association. And this is an initiative to create wildlife corridors and passage from all the way from Yellowstone National Park up to the Yukon. And so you can see that here. And so Canmore is about there, and we're right in the midst of the Yellowstone-to-Yukon corridor. And so this is a close-up of the town itself. And so as you can see, this is all stuff that we've built. It's pretty hard for wildlife to get through here. And so it's really important that we keep areas like green spaces and parks open for wildlife to be able to get from one side of the valley to the other, because it's really important that they can move all the way from down here to up here, because science has shown and studies have shown that that's where they really like to move. And so it's important that we're able to keep those corridors open so that they can do that. So what happens when we aren't able to do that and we aren't able to give wildlife the space that they need, or if we aren't being aware of wildlife? Well, then we have negative human-wildlife interactions. And so that is when, in this instance, bears have strong sense of smell. And if they smell human food and it's not dealt with in the right way, so in this sense, the cooler wasn't what we would call bear safe or wildlife safe. Usually try and hang it out of the way of a bear so that they can't get the food. And so that makes bears and wildlife think that human food is good and it's easy to get. And so that's where that creates danger, because there'll be more and more human-wildlife interaction. So we really want to avoid that by giving wildlife enough space to do their own thing, find their own food on their own, and not have to come into human spaces. But that is a really difficult balance to achieve. So I'm going to focus on the Bow Valley once again, and the Bow River specifically. So this is, on the left is a big aerial photo of the Bow Valley, and this is called the Bow River. And so that is, on the right is actually me paddling down the Bow River. And it's a big river that goes straight through the valley. So it's really important for wildlife. It's important habitat, important for wildlife to get water and to live on the shores of the Bow River. And with that, if it will load, there we go. I will take you on a paddle with me down the river. So those are black bear prints for those who can't read there. And we know that because of the shape of the toes and the claws.
Hi everyone, my name's Robin. I use she, her pronouns, and a practice that I have that I got from a friend that I began taking up is doing territory acknowledgements or land acknowledgements while on the land. And so currently I'm on the land with my mom on the lands of the Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina, and Blackfoot nations, and within Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. And this is what is known as Treaty 7 territory. And we are white settlers on these lands. And so we take our responsibility as unwelcome guests on the stolen lands of what's called Canada very seriously. Yeah, I just want to start with that. Part of that is taking care of the land and being really, really good environmental stewards. So when we're out like we are now, a simple thing to keep in mind is leave no trace, So doing what we can to leave no trace, to if there's garbage around, obviously we're in a canoe, but we can pull over and pick stuff up so that we're leaving the area cleaner and the ecosystems better off than we found them. This also means learning about our history and learning to recognize and hear and listen to other people's histories, other groups of histories, Indigenous peoples. The way that they tell their histories is different to the textbook colonial history that a lot of us learn in our classes. And so that's also important when considering a territorial acknowledgement, is understanding what learning must go alongside and then what actions must go alongside with those learnings. I saw beaver, so we pulled over, but I think they've gone now. But we found some remnants of a beaver. You can see the beaver chew marks on that log. It's pretty cool.
All right, just coming into shore, Robin noticed a can. Not an easy place to get out, but she noticed a can. Oh, grab the can. Well done.
So right here we have a golf course, and then beside the golf course there's a set of train tracks, and then beside the train tracks there's a bike trail that goes all the way to Banff, and then there's the highway, the Trans-Canada Highway. And so for our animals hoping to get from those trees over there, from that area, across the valley, and then over to either the river or to this side of the valley, they need to cross all of that. A large issue facing wildlife around the world and in the Bow Valley is habitat loss. Large animals such as the black bear, whose prints we saw earlier, require big, continuous pieces of habitat to feed, breed, and thrive in. When they lose access to those lands, it can cause serious problems for them and for us. When bigger areas of habitat are cut up into smaller sections, it is called fragmentation. This can lead to putting species including grizzly bears, wolverines, and wolves at high risk of dying. One solution to create connectivity can be through respecting and implementing wildlife corridors.
All right, so that was our little paddle down the Bow River. Ooh. Sorry, folks.
Thinking about it. It's trying to get there. There we go.
There you go. This is my final slide, and then we'll have our question period. But I just wanted to finish off that as incredible and beautiful as it is here, and as much work that has been put into living with wildlife and to really like building wildlife corridors and all of that, it's the wildlife who suffer from these in many cases, because it's their habitat that's being developed on and being roads being pushed through. And of course, like I live here, and that's the only way that I live here is because my house is built on these lands, in wildlife lands. And so acknowledging that and trying to move forward in ways that can where we can really live with wildlife and where wildlife can be living as well is important. And so when we say we live with wildlife, we must work extremely hard to make sure that wildlife are able to be living and thriving here as well. We have a long way to go, but by being respectful and responsible guests to these lands, hopefully we can live in a way that allows both humans and wildlife to thrive. And I'll stop sharing.
Fantastic. Well, Robin, thank you so much for such a fun presentation, and Charlotte for the intro. That was fantastic about Roots and Shoots and all the amazing work that Jane Goodall Institute is doing. Yeah, guys, we are going to dive in with questions now. So we've got a whole bunch of you on YouTube, including Mr. Brooks' class, and you guys have been very respectful, so thank you for that. We're going to go live to all our groups. Everyone's tech seems to be working. In fact, we're going to begin with Mr. Brooks joining us in Voorhees, New Jersey. If you want to unmute your microphone and kick us off with a question, you are welcome to come in. Hi, Mr. Brooks.
Hi, how you doing? Hi, Robin. Thank you guys so much for the presentation. One of the questions that you covered that my class was asking is about what are some other examples of the problems that you guys see in that area with humans interacting with the wildlife? And then a question for myself, I just wanted to know, what's your educational background in order for you to do what it is that you do?
Yeah, so for the first question, other issues, a lot of it is human-wildlife interactions. And so, for instance, people not knowing how to, there's a photo that I didn't put on the slide, but I could have, and that'll be, people who are maybe less familiar with the Bow Valley or don't totally know the danger of, say, bears or cougars. They don't necessarily mean to be dangerous, but they can be very dangerous to humans when you get too close. And so something I grew up with was you always give them your distance when you show up and you see a bear, which does happen. I'll be riding my bike to school or on a run and I'll see a bear. And so then you back away from it, and we have what we call bear spray. And I don't have it with me, but maybe I should have, just to show everyone what it is. But it's basically pepper spray. And that's a last resort. But some people don't know about that, and they don't. So they'll be in their car and they'll see a bear and they'll drive really close to it and try and take photos and just get too close or try and feed wildlife. And so that'll be a negative encounter. So the bear or the wildlife, whatever it may be, might try and attack the person. And then ultimately the person is hurt, and then that animal is then killed. And so that's really sad. And that's something that there's a bunch of different programs trying to mitigate that and prevent that. Others is big developments that are being proposed that block wildlife corridors. And so that's something that is difficult because the Bow Valley is a place where a lot of people want to live, and it's not very affordable. So I doubt I'll ever be able to live here. I'm currently in my parents' house, but I won't be able to afford to live here once I finish university. So more houses is important, but at the same time, they can't block the wildlife corridors because the animals need to live here as well. And my education. So this is a volunteer like with the Jane Goodall Institute, the Youth Advisory Council, and I'm currently doing my Indigenous Studies and Environmental Studies, like a double major. And so I've been involved in kind of wildlife advocacy my whole life growing up here, and also just try and do a bunch of different like as many opportunities as I can to be involved. So whether that's volunteering on things like the Jane Goodall Institute or environmental conferences or things like that.
Yeah. Fantastic. One thing that we get from a lot of our speakers, regardless of background, is this idea of volunteering. I mean, most science communication, outreach, engagement begins with volunteering. And so for your students, whatever age they happen to be, make sure you guys take those opportunities, whether it's working at a wildlife health center, working for an amazing organization like JGI Canada, lots of opportunities out there, and so many people doing incredible work had their start that way. So thank you, Mr. Brooks, for the first questions. That was great. Mr. Shattuck, joining us in Chalk River, Ontario. Come on in, man, and take us away.
Hey, Robin, thanks for your presentation. One of my students had a question about essentially cutting off access for the wildlife to move. And I think he's wondering, is there a balance there? Like if we wanted to stop wildlife strikes on highways, fencing in along all the highways, if you stop the movement, would that be more beneficial than for the life saving, or would that cause more problems because you're cutting off that route of migration or of travel for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in Banff National Park, which is just near here, they actually do fence. So that photo that I showed you that had the overpass over the highway, everything beside the overpass is fenced. So they do fence their highways, and that's a pretty huge project because the highway is really long. It goes all through Banff National Park. But then once Banff National Park ends and you start to get kind of into Canmore, it's not fenced. And so we have had many incidents, and this is really sad. This time last year, 6 elk were killed on the highway, like right near my house. I think what happened is the herd was trying to cross, and there was a big truck coming, or a couple, and they just kind of ran straight into them. And that's something that is because our highway is not fenced. And so in my opinion, I think that it should be, or we should be trying to find strategies for that to not happen. But yeah, the fencing of the highways is huge. And in Banff National Park, that helps. The train tracks aren't fenced though. And so when the train goes by, grain falls onto the train tracks, and then wildlife are attracted to that grain. So they'll go and be eating on the train tracks, like, oh, this is such good grain. And then a train will come along and kill them as well. And so that's also something that is an ongoing problem.
I'm really glad we got the wildlife corridor question. It's really interesting. Closer to Chalk River in Ontario, Sudbury has a lot of things along the 400 highway that are fenced. You just really need to have wildlife corridors. So roads really do completely separate tracts of wildlife. It's amazing how a little bit of tarmac will prevent that sort of cross-pollination of creatures. But if you have those overpasses, which are used extensively by wildlife, and we saw a bit of that in the footage, it really does make a big positive difference. So great question, guys. Miss Lundell's class, you guys are heading out. I know it's the end of your day, so if you have a question for us before you walk out,
everybody.
Illinois. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. Do you have a question for us before you go?
Anybody have a question? Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. No, it's time for us to go.
That's okay. So glad you enjoyed, though. And if you have more, share them later. Let's go to Mr. Thomas's class. So Mr. Thomas is joining us in Florida. His group is all over the place. So if you have a question for us, come on in, man.
Yeah, I have students from Canada and all over the U.S. And so I'm hoping they're going to send me some more questions. I'm waiting for them to do that. But anyway, the first question I have from them is, so I think it was when you were talking about the black bears. Oh, you can't hear me? Oh.
They won't be able to hear you, but we hear you and we'll hear the answer. This always happens. Don't worry.
Yeah, but I'm just going to unmute myself so they can hear me. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm representing kids from all over the U.S. and then from Canada too. And so I'm hoping they're going to type me some more questions. But the first one that I got was, I think it's when you were talking about the black bears, and he wanted to know, Alexander wanted to know, how far do you need to be from a wild animal?
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, Robin, unmute. There we go.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So to be totally honest, I forget what the kind of standard, like WildSmart is a company organization that I know that teaches kind of like that type of thing here. But I want to say probably a couple school buses at the minimum. And really, so when I talked about my bear spray, and if people are interested, I could go and get a can. That sprays pepper spray about I think 10 meters, maybe less. And so that is a last resort thing. But you don't want to be near wildlife. I mean, cougars, you probably won't see them because they're cats and they're sneaky. Bears, you might see them and you want to definitely keep your distance. Elk and deer, for instance, like here, they're quite used to people. And so you could walk right by them, maybe like 10, 20 feet away, and they're just be like, oh, hey, and you're like, hey. And that's kind of how it is in the valley here, at least.
No, that's great. It's all good. That's a perfect answer. I checked out the Wild Smart distance for wildlife. So with bears, it's about 100 meters, which is about 330 feet for our American friends. And other large animals, it's at least 100 feet. So it's quite a distance. You don't really want to get up close and personal with things. In Ontario, we have Algonquin Park, which is famous for a lot of Ontario groups. And so moose are a big thing that you'll see on the side of the road. It's really important to give those animals a wide berth. Even herbivores, even things that you wouldn't expect could cause danger to people, can really do so if they're disturbed in any serious way. So there's great organizations like Wild Smart that are working to make sure that that sort of conflict doesn't happen, and they do a really, really good job. So great question, guys. I'm going to take a question from Miss Vajik Breka, joining us on YouTube. They want to know, let's see, they've asked a bunch of questions for us, which is fantastic. What is your favorite and least favorite part of your work or studies? And you can just stick with favorite if everything's all perfect.
That's a good question. So I'm currently, I am studying, but I am working at my student society union, and that's a pretty new job. And so I love working with other people and learning and unlearning things and collaborating with people. And so that's probably one of my favorite parts of both work and study. And I really enjoyed putting this together as well. It was so fun to get out, and I love working when it's not COVID times, like with kids. And so yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things.
Fantastic, Robin. We got a question from Mr. Larkin on YouTube, and then we're going to go back to our live classes to wrap up with one more from each of them. So Mr. Larkin wanted to know, how long have the corridors been in use in Banff National Park in the Canadian area?
I'm not actually sure. Let's just look that up real quick.
I actually have this. I have it in the background in case you didn't know offhand, so I can look it up for you. So yes, in 2017, they turned 20, so it's been about 24 years now that these corridors have been in place. Again, extremely effective, and one of the most well-charted stories of conservation in the wild in a national park in the world. So if you want to see how that's been done, how they've developed over time, how much they've grown, how they've spread that idea to other places, do check that out. You can really easily Google Wildlife Corridors Banff, Wildlife Corridors Alberta, and you'll see this in action in a really great way. So no need to search things. That's what we're here for, Robin, is to do all the hosting stuff for you.
Perfect.
Let's go back to Mr. Brooks's class. If you guys want to unmute and come on back in, go for it.
Hi, guys. So I don't have any more questions from my students, but I have a question. I thought that was really cool that you guys had that overpass that you were talking about so that wildlife can move from one side to the other. In New Jersey, we don't have any of those. So is that like a recent development that you guys are doing in Canada and in that area?
I mean, so Jesse, I'm not sure if wildlife corridors, I'm not sure if this is like, are those 20, like the overpasses as well?
Yeah, so just in general, the wildlife corridors seem to be about 20, 25 years old in Canada. I don't know where they've been implemented around the world. I know that Banff is one of the big pioneers of them. And so the Yellowstone-to-Yukon initiative that you talked about is drawing upon the expertise of that and trying to implement it elsewhere in the world. Having driven in the northeastern US, you guys don't have wildlife corridors. And in fact, I've never actually seen areas with more wildlife kill on the side of the road than I have in Pennsylvania, in New York, and New Jersey, because of that lack of, I guess, ability for animals to cross habitats like that. So it's slowly but surely being implemented elsewhere. It's really expensive. So Banff put a lot of effort into making those possible. To fence 150 kilometers or 100 miles of highway is no mean feat. And to set up those overpasses or underpasses does cost a lot of money, but it does save a lot in collisions. It saves a lot of species. It helps protect the ecosystem. So hopefully you guys are in a position where that might be implemented soon. Again, certainly the Banff team is helping spread that message really far and wide. So sorry to answer all that, Robin, but it's a great question. I'm really glad we got it. And thanks, Mr. Brooks, for sharing a question on behalf of your students. I love when teachers do that, so that was great. Robin, anything that jumps out to add from a local perspective? I mean, you live there. You get to see this in action all the time, and it really is a special place in Canmore. So I don't know. Anything to fill in?
No, I don't think so. It was really cool answering people's questions, and yeah, the overpasses in particular are something that are very unique and have like Banff National Park's very proud of that. And so it's cool to see how they've been working, and I guess it's something I grew up with, and so
yeah.
I didn't think it was anything too out of the usual, but it definitely is.
Yeah, I love it. You know, thinking of Canmore too, my few times I've had the chance to visit, if there is a bear that's seen on one of the trails, they'll close down the trail. They'll just say, look, you can't go on this trail right now. Their park staff are really, really dedicated about that sort of thing to try and prevent that sort of conflict with wildlife. So this is something we're actually going to be covering a lot in this Global Biofest coming up, as human-wildlife conflict around the planet. Try and mitigate that as much as possible so that people are happy, animals are happy, everybody wins. So great example we got to share today. All right, time for 2 more questions, guys. So Mr. Shattuck's class, come on back in and we'll wrap up with Mr. Thomas in a minute.
Great. So, Robin, Abigail in my class was wondering if you might have any idea how many either animals or maybe it might even be species are being lost due to humans developing on habitats in a in a year or whatever.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure how many species are being lost. I know that I think it's 11 species of large mammals use like wildlife overpasses more than like 2,000 times. 200,000 times. And that includes things like fox and wolverines and like garter snakes and beavers and so that tells us that those animals are being affected. And so I like which ones are being lost. I'm not yet.
It's a big question, Robin, right? And this is something that we get in a lot of our broadcasts, like how many species are affected? What's going on? How many individuals have been lost? It's basically impossible to quantify that sort of thing, but we do know that habitat loss is the single biggest driver of species extinction on this planet. So where habitat is lost, if you as a person don't have a home, if you don't have a place to grow food or to live at the end of the day, that is a huge problem for you. And same thing with animals. If we eliminate these habitats, if we block them off from one another, animals can't survive that. A wolf cannot survive in a small tract of forest. It needs huge, wide areas to survive and hunt and live and survive. And so we're seeing this all over the planet. Again, it's something that we've been covering in a lot of broadcasts lately, but it really speaks to the importance of these wildlife corridors. And Robin, 200,000 times for each of these species. It's amazing. So they are used. They are intensively used by wildlife, which is really, really cool. So yeah, great question, guys. By the way, you mentioned garter snakes, and I'm really sorry, but we're going to go really nerdy for a second. Everyone, when you're done this broadcast, should look up the Narcissus snake dens, which are in Manitoba, and it's like the coolest thing you have no idea about and you've never seen, but you should check it out. The largest group of reptiles on this planet breeding happens in Manitoba every year. In fact, right around now, not too far from now, and it's really, really cool. So your fault, Robin. You brought up garters. I'm sorry. I'm a reptile guy. Josh, Mr. Thomas, if you want to wrap us up with one more question before we wrap, come on in.
Okay, thanks, guys. I don't know if you can answer all 3 of these, but I have 3 quick questions, so maybe you can do it quick. But the first is, what animals migrate to the Bow Valley area where you are, Robin, from Yellowstone? And then the second, I don't know if you want me to ask all 3 of these together. I'll just start with that.
We can do all 3 actually if you want to. So which animals migrate? I'll keep track of these 2 in the chat bar.
Okay, great. Which animals migrate? And then what's your favorite animal? And then, is it nice or not nice to be living near to wildlife?
Ooh, great questions.
So the first question. So the photos that I had of bears and I don't know if I had wolves on there as a photo, but basically their habitat is huge, and so they will be, there's like they get tracked sometimes. Like some animals have like collars on them or little like trackers on them, and they when you see kind of the distances they travel in a day. And Jesse, maybe can you Google the distance a Wolverine travels in a day, and we can just talk about that. But
I'm on it in the background. Keep answering.
It's huge, and so they're not necessarily migrating for those specific animals, but they are using that territory, and they're going down to Yellowstone, and they're going up to the Yukon, and they are just using that land and those corridors because they just travel huge distances. And so when Jesse gets it, we'll bring that up. But the second,
On average day, Wolverine can go over 15 miles, and their home range can be 900 square kilometers. So it's massive. We've had Wolverine programs in the past. They're like great white sharks of land. Like, they just travel absolutely everywhere. Wolves too. You can see them go from like, it's just thousands of kilometers, thousands of miles, which is a really quite incredible thing, and speaks to the need for something like Yellowstone-to-Yukon. So, okay, back to you, Robin.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, and so my favorite animal, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm gonna have to come back to that. Wolverines definitely are very impressive, very so wild. What they do, they survive kind of on mountaintops in not super favorable conditions. Mountain goats are pretty cool. They're goats that kind of like hop around the mountains and can climb pretty well, which is cool. Yeah, and then I think the last question was kind of if I like living with wildlife, and I do. I love it. It's very special, and it definitely is very humbling. You realize there are these huge like animals and mammals and ecosystems that you're living with, and that we really need to respect. And it's definitely, sometimes it makes me sad because you see kind of what's happening to some of them sometimes, and they're losing their lives sometimes for us to survive, but hopefully we can change that. And so, yeah, I definitely really do. And even, yeah.
I love that. You know, it's so nice whether you live in a place like Canmore where you're so close to such incredible wildlife, or if you're in the heart of a major city. I'm in Toronto, and yet the chance to go out and explore wildlife near me is still my most special thing. It's my favorite thing to get out for a walk in a park when I've done these broadcasts. And so wherever you guys happen to be joining from today, go out and explore those areas. Maybe you're lucky like Robin and you have elk and bears and cougars and other wild and amazing creatures right outside your door. If not, check out birds, check out insects at your feet. It's always a special experience. It's what Backyard Bio is all about. And so, Robin, thank you so much today for this amazing tour of such a special place in the world. Your own experiences there, getting to see a canoe trip with your mom live on camera is kind of fun for her and you, I'm sure, both. And what I want to do now, just before we do a quick wrap up, is share some of the links that you talked about and that Charlotte talked about at the beginning. So I'll bring those up. If you guys want to check out more about the amazing work Jane Goodall Institute of Canada does, check out janegoodall.ca. We also have Jane coming on for a program this week. So if you want to check that out, exploringbytheseat.com. We've got that program and many others this week. If you guys want to register and tune in, camera spots are long gone, but we really do welcome you to join us for that if you'd like. And if you want to see more about the Yellowstone-to-Yukon amazing initiative to connect these incredible wild places, y2y.net. Robin, of course, started her presentation with a fantastic land acknowledgement. Nativeland.ca is your one-stop shop to find out where you live in this country or in the US and beyond, to see what Indigenous peoples live there for the last many thousands of years, which is a really exciting resource. And finally, you want to check us out at backyardbio.net, join our Global Nature campaign, get out and take pictures of those cougars near you, or go to globalbiofest.com and join us for our epic festival in just 2 weekends. I really encourage you to do so. Robin, thank you again so much for such a fun talk. Charlotte, thanks for sharing that amazing introduction with us today. And as you know, Charlotte and Robin, I know it's your first time with us. What we do to end every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our teachers. I know their kids are at home, but Mr. Brooks, Mr. Shattuck, and Mr. Thomas, if you want to join me in saying a big